Hello and welcome to Benz English Lab. In today's episode, we want to look at words, terminologies, terms, jargons that are peculiar, that are associated or related to the CID. Now, wait a minute, whether or not you are a part of the CID or you're just a civilian, this discussion, this class, this lesson, this session is for you because, of course, you know that no knowledge is a waste. Right, so without much ado, let's go straight into today's topic. Now, this is CID related terminologies. CID related terminologies. Now, that is going to be our focus for this class. We're going to look at words, terms, terminologies that relate to the CID. To start with, I understand that not everybody even understands the meaning of the acronym CID. Now, what does CID mean? The CID, of course, is a department, is a section of the police force. Okay. Now, this means the C stands for criminal. Criminal. The I stands for investigation. Investigation. And finally, the D stands for department. So altogether, we have criminal investigation department. So the CID simply means criminal investigation department. What does this say already? What this means already is that the CID is never a person, is never an individual. Contrary to what I've heard a lot of people say, oh, my father, my friend, my brother, my mother, my friend, my cousin is a CID. No, your friend, your father, your cousin, your spouse cannot be a CID because a CID is a department, is a place, is a section of the police force. So the person who works in the CID can be said to be a CID officer, or just simply call them detectives. As simple as that. Detective, a person, an individual who works in the CID, in the Department of Police, that carries out investigation on criminal activities is called a detective or a CID officer. All right. Now, there's something very peculiar that is very peculiar about CID detectives or officers. Now, they wear plain clothes, just like I dressed now. They don't have a specific uniform like you have the regular police officers or the army officers, wear. They don't have unique or special uniforms. They just wear plain clothes. They could dress like this. They're more like civilians who are in the military or in the police force. They do that to disguise just so the work of investigation can go on very smoothly. So CID officers, police officers aren't people who dress in uniform that you can easily recognize them on the street. Of course, they're disguised by wearing plain clothes. That's the first thing we must understand about CID. So the CID is a department of the police force that focuses on carrying out investigation on criminal activities, which is where we have the C to be criminal, the I to be investigation, and the D to be department. Department. Okay. Now, CID related terminologies. By terminologies, another word we can use for terminology is term. 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 So the shortened form of terminologies is term. Now, if you don't want to say term, if you don't want to say terminologies, you can say jargons. 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 Okay. Jargons. Okay. Jargons. Jargons are words, terms that are peculiar to a particular profession, or words, terms, jargons that are unique to a circle or profession. So the CID is the cycle we want to look at, is the circle we want to look at actually. It is the department we want to focus on, is the profession we want to focus on today. So we're going to look at the jargons the terminologies, the term, the words, W-R-D-S, words that are close, that are closely used, that are associated to the department of police known as a CID. So in this class, there are 5 words we're going to look at. There are 5 words to look at, to understand, to be familiar with, actually. So the first word is evidence. The first word we want to look at in this class is evidence. Evidence. Number 2 is forensic analysis. Forensic analysis. Forensic, 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 forensic. Analysis, analysis, analysis. Forensic analysis. Number 3, we have interrogation. 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 So the third word, the third terminology we're going to look at in this class is going to be interrogation. And number 4 is alibi. Alibi, alibi, alibi. 3 syllables. Alibi is the 4th one. And number 5, which is going to be the last on the list, of course, not the least. So it's motive, 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 motive. So the first, evidence. Second, forensic analysis. Number 3, interrogation. Number 4, alibi. And number 5, motive. So we'll be explaining these 5 words, what they mean. We just have in sentences, and afterwards we'll close we're going to close this episode, and then we'll look forward to the next one. So to start with, evidence. This word evidence, of course, is like the center of what the CID is about. In fact, it's just like a doctor who goes out, whose job, whose primary responsibility is to go out and look for people who are sick, who are not doing well in life. I mean, I don't mean financially not doing well, but I mean who are not doing well medically, health-wise, you're not doing well. So the job of the CID is to go about to collect evidence. So evidence is the primary job of the CID. So the first is evidence. And what does evidence mean? Evidence. Now, some might think that the word evidence simply should be something that is concrete, something that you can see. Now, evidence is really not about what you can see alone. There is a lot to an evidence than just being what you can see. So, what is an evidence? What does it mean? As an officer, as a detective, as a human, as a civilian, you hear the word evidence, or as an officer, you have to go collect evidence. What should you bear in mind once you hear the word evidence? Now, evidence is a physical. Physical means what you can see. It's a physical or documentary proof. Documentary proof used to support. Used to support a physical or documentary proof used to support or disprove. The opposite of support is disprove. If I support you, if I don't support you, it means I'm disproving something. If I want to approve of something, I support. So if I don't want to support it, I disprove it. Okay. So physical or documentary proof used to support or disprove a fact in a criminal investigation. In a criminal investigation. So evidence is something you can see, first of all, and at all the times, it can be what you may not see. It could just be a voice. The voice of a person in a recording can be a piece of evidence, okay? So a piece of evidence is a physical or a documentary, collected documentary proof that is used to support, to back up a claim or to disprove of a claim. I hope that is clear. So, and in this case, this is what you need to strengthen as an officer. You need evidence to strengthen your claim or your investigation. As a matter of fact, remember that the essence of every investigation is to come out with evidence, is to produce evidence. And sometimes you use evidence, existing evidence, to also carry out further investigation. You use evidence to bring out further evidence in order to arrive at a conclusion. Now, the conclusion could be maybe could be whether you've been nailing a suspect or you find a suspect to be free or whatever charge or whatever allegation that is put or that is it on their feet. All right, so evidence is a physical or documentary proof used to support or disprove a fact in a criminal investigation. All right, let's look at two sample sentences. First, the detectives collected evidence from the crime scene. The detectives collected evidence from the crime scene. Now, when something happens, for example, I think it was last week or recently, we all heard about the assassination of Charlie Kirk in the United States of America. Okay, so now where that shooting took place is the crime scene, is a scene of the crime. So a crime scene is a place where a crime is alleged or is said to have taken place. Okay, so example one, the detectives collected evidence from the crime scene. So it means you can collect evidence like eggs in a basket. But of course, evidence in this case is not what you can hold on to. It's not always something concrete. And sometimes it can be something concrete. For example, in the case of Charlie Kirk, you remember that a gun was found around the place, after the act was carried out. A piece of gun was found somewhere. Okay, so the gun was taken, it was collected. So in the case of investigation, by CID, we use collect for gathering of pieces of evidence. Okay, the detectives collected evidence from the crime scene. Mr. Salim collected a piece of evidence from the crime scene. Okay, number two, the lack of evidence made it difficult for the CID to build a strong case against their suspect. The lack of evidence made it difficult for their officer, for the detective, for the CID to build a strong case against the suspect. Now, look at the use of evidence. What I'm saying here is the lack of evidence. What that means is when you don't have evidence as an officer, as a police, okay, or as a witness, then it becomes very difficult for you to pin a crime on an individual or on a suspect. So the lack, that is, the absence of evidence will make it difficult for any officer to arrest or to condemn an individual, to condemn a suspect of a crime. Okay, so that will be all about evidence. Remember that evidence is a physical or documentary proof used to support or disprove a fact in a criminal investigation. So whether as an officer you want to present a voice recording of a suspect, or you want to present a thumbprint or a fingerprint, rather, not thumbprint, a fingerprint or a DNA evidence, okay? Just to show that what you're saying is a fact, okay? So that is that about evidence. And number two, forensic analysis. Forensic analysis. What does forensic analysis mean? As a matter of fact, when it's very difficult to have a physical evidence, now forensic analysis is what is often carried out to determine whether what an officer has as an evidence is something to go by, is something to hold on to, or something to discard, to throw away, to dispose into the trash. Okay. Now, so what is forensic analysis? Forensic analysis is the scientific examination of evidence. The scientific examination of evidence, such as DNA, fingerprints, or ballistics, to help solve crime. I'm going to explain what ballistics mean, but let's go back to what forensic analysis means again. Now, forensic analysis is a scientific examination of evidence such as DNA, fingerprints, or ballistics to help solve a crime. Now, sometimes we have evidences that are beyond the rise, that are beyond sensual examinations. Sometimes it's very easy for civilians to say, oh, this person did it because they can easily see it. But in situations, maybe for example, the victims of crimes are dead, they're no more. Okay. Now, the right ways that CID officers or detectives will carry out the investigation as to nailing the suspect of their death, is to carry out forensic examination, forensic analysis. Okay. Now, this way, the officers could go for the blood sample or the fluid, the water, the fluid in the body of the victim, whether they're dead or not, okay, or cut the hair of the person involved or the victim of the crime, and then subject such evidences, such piece of materials to forensic examinations. Forensic in this case simply refers to scientific. Now, this is not what another person can easily do. So they need to put them under scientific experiments in the laboratories to use the knowledge of science to determine whether, those pieces of materials or those items collected from an individual, confirms that, okay, these things can be traced to this individual. Like if I go to a supermarket or a mall, for example, and then something happens, and then a gun is found on the ground, and then somebody has just been shot, and then a gun is found on the ground, and the CCTV cameras have been destroyed. So what the officers will do will be, maybe, for example, I'm not an officer, I'm not a CID personnel, but I'm just saying this as based on what I know. So the gun is picked, maybe with a glove in the ends, and then the gun is subjected to a forensic analysis, such that the last fingerprint on the gun is assessed, is analyzed scientifically to determine whose gene is found on the gun. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just saying this as a civilian. It's not as if I have so much in-depth knowledge of how forensic analysis works. Okay, so forensic analysis again is the scientific examination of evidence. So when you have a piece of evidence, you subject it to scientific tests. You take them to the laboratories to test to determine whether they're actually factual things to work with. So their examination of evidence such as DNA, fingerprints, or ballistics to help solve crime. So what are ballistics? Ballistics actually refer to firearms, or the scientific studies of how firearms are being shot at people. So, such as you want to determine, what goes into the production of a bullet, missiles and all that. So that is what ballistics are about. Okay, ballistics are about scientific creation of firearms. Okay. So the scientific examination of evidence, such as DNA, fingerprints, or ballistics, to help solve crime. Now, just in the case of Charlie Kirk, okay, you remember that part of the things they found in the body of late Charlie Kirk, may so rest in peace again. One of the things found in his body was the bullet, evidence or maybe particles of the bullet, of the ballistics, shoot into his system, okay? So that will be collected and then exposed to scientific examination such that to determine, perhaps the company or the factory producing or that has produced, the bullet, the ballistics, So that is exactly what ballistic is about. Ballistic is actually the scientific study or the study of the production of firearms, bullets, guns, firearms, or missiles in general. So what is forensic analysis? Or forensic analysis is the scientific examination of evidence such as DNA, fingerprints, or ballistics to help solve crime. Now, sentence examples or example sentences. One, the CID, the CID requested means asked for, the CID asked for, requested forensic analysis of the suspect's clothing to look for any trace of evidence. The CID requested forensic analysis of the suspect's clothing to look for any trace of evidence. This also happened in the case of Charlie Kirk. Now, the gentleman, the suspect, what's his name now? Is it Tyler Robinson? Now, his clothes was collected for forensic analysis. So just to be sure that the clothes is wearing, because I think from the news that I watched, he had got to change. He wore two different clothes on the day of the crime. The first was the clothes he wore to the scene. When he goes to the scene of the crime, it changed. It changed to another clothing. Right. So the one it changed to was examined on the forensic analysis, on the scientific experiment, and then everything traced back to Tyler Robinson. Okay. So the first example there is the sender requested forensic analysis of the suspect's clothing to look for any trace of evidence. Because as I am now, if anything happens, for example, God forbid, if I'm found on a crime scene, if this cloth is found on a crime scene, and then somebody has sent me this video that go for the teacher, go for the teacher, go for the teacher. He committed the crime. Now, this is not the only type of cloth. This is not the only sample cloth. This the only variant of the cloth made in a type, in all of this place that I live in. So what happens is, if a cloth like this, a prototype, is found in a crime scene, what CID officers or personnel will do to collect the clothes and then subject it to forensic analysis. They subject that and then they determine, okay, the body that has touched the clothes, whose body, who owns this body, who owns this DNA, who owns this air, who owns all of this, who owns all of that. So that is what this is about. The CID asked for forensic analysis of the suspect's clothing to look for any trace of evidence. Example 2. Forensic analysis of the bullet. Forensic analysis of the bullet casing revealed that it came from a rare type of firearm. Did you see that? Forensic analysis of the bullet casing, the covering of the bullet casing. A case is what contains something. Like this marker is the marker is inside of this case, and this is the case, okay? The covering is the case, okay? This is the marker itself, right? Now, this is the case. Now, what we're saying here is forensic analysis of the bullet casing showed that it came from a rare type of firearm. Rare and uncommon, a special kind, something not common. Okay, a rare type of firearm. Now we go to, so that'll be all about the second terminology under CID in this class. So number 3, interrogation. Interrogation simply refers to question, okay? Questions or questioning. Now, the process, what does this mean? Interrogation simply means the process of questioning. Sorry, must be a mistake. The process of questioning a suspect. Interrogation is the process of questioning. Questioning, ing, right? Question plus ing is the process of questioning a suspect or a witness in a detailed and systematic way. To gather, to collect information. So again, the process of questioning, of asking question from a suspect, okay, in order to gather evidence, in order to gather information, and of course, interrogation by CID. It's not what is done haphazardly. It's not what you can do anyhow. It has to be systematic. That's why we have systematic here. It is done in a detailed and systematic way to gather information. Not you as an officer saying, why did you kill the man? Why did you kill the man? Where were you? No, come on. It has to be systematic. It has to be scientific. It has to be detailed. Now, the way I will ask question from a suspected criminal is not the same way a trained CID officer or detective will carry out, we ask questions or will interrogate a suspect. So, interrogation is the process of questioning a suspect or witness in a detailed and systematic way to gather information. So, sample sentences. 1. The detectives conducted an intense interrogation. The detectives conducted an intense interrogation of the suspect in order to get him to confess. The detectives conducted an intense interrogation. The detectives conducted an intense, deep interrogation, deep questioning of the suspect in order to get him, that is when the suspect is a man, in order to get him to confess, in order to get the suspect to tell the truth. Okay, so example 2. During their interrogation, the suspect's alibi fell apart when inconsistencies were pointed out. During their interrogation, the suspect's alibi fell apart when inconsistencies were spotted, when inconsistencies were pointed out. You know what inconsistencies are? Inconsistencies are irregularities. Irregular statement. Sir, officer, I didn't commit the crime. As a matter of fact, I was not around when it happened. At another time, the same person is saying, sir, officer, actually, I didn't commit the crime. I just came in. And then I heard a gunshot. Oh my goodness, you're saying two things already. No, officer, I didn't hear a gunshot. Somebody told me there was a gunshot. Now, inconsistencies. Sir, I was there. No, I was not there. I came to the place, but I left. No, when I left, I came back to pick something. Come on. Inconsistencies, irregularities. Your words are not matching. Okay. So the detectives conducted an intense interrogation of the suspect in order to get him to confess. And 2, during their interrogation, the suspect's alibi fell apart when inconsistencies were pointed out. Of course, the big word here is alibi, which we're going to be looking at after now. Alibi is the next word we're looking at. Okay. Number 4, alibi. What does alibi mean? Alibi is a claim or piece of evidence that a person was elsewhere. Mark the word elsewhere was committed. A claim or piece of evidence that a person was elsewhere when a crime was committed, when a crime was committed or was said to have been committed. All right. So I'm going to take that again. Alibi is a claim or a piece of evidence that a person was elsewhere. Elsewhere simply means another place. Now, is a claim or a piece of evidence that a person was elsewhere when a crime was committed. So, take for example, using their Charlie Kirk's mother assassination as an example. Of course, his soul may so rest in perfect peace. Right. Now, imagine that I wasn't even in the US when the crime was committed, when the shooting was done, when the assassination was carried out. I wasn't in the United States. And right now, I'm still not in the United States. Okay, let's say I'm now in the United States, which of course I'm not in the United States, by the way, not in the US. Now, that happened, let's say the crime happened in the morning. I wasn't around when it happened. And right now it's afternoon and I'm not around the crime scene. And I shouldn't even be found at the crime scene in the first place because when a crime happens, officers should mark out the place and should create a surveillance and then so that nobody, a crime scene should be out of bound to surveillance, you understand, just so that proper investigation can be carried out. Let's say a house where somebody had done been murdered. I wasn't around when the murder took place, but right now, hours later, I'm back there. And officers have to investigate the matter, they need to interrogate every other person. So when they come to me, when they call me for questioning, what I have to say is, officer, I was not even around when this murder took place, when this crime was committed, I was not around. Okay, so the process of saying I was not around when the incident happened is alibi. It means I'm claiming alibi that I am not around, that I was not around, okay? So that I was in another place, that I was elsewhere when the crime was committed. So when a suspect claims alibi or applies for alibi, or when they claim alibi, they're trying to say that they were not present at the time of the crime, at the time the crime was being committed, okay? So alibi is a claim or a piece of evidence that a person was elsewhere, E-L-S-E, then where, elsewhere, where the crime was said to have been committed, when the crime was committed. Now let's get example sentences. One, the suspect provided an alibi that placed him at a friend's house at the time of the crime. The suspect provided an alibi that placed him at a friend's house at the time of a crime. What this is saying is that this suspect here in the first sentence, in the first example sentence under alibi, is trying to say that, man, this person was at his friend's house when the crime was committed elsewhere. So you don't have any proof to hold this suspect down, okay? Because the claim, the alibi has been found to be true. Okay, this person was elsewhere when the crime was committed. It's like a crime happening in house A, and then the suspect lives in house B. And in fact, when the crime was committed in house A, the suspect in house B, whether or not they've quarreled before, whether Mr. B had fought Mr. A before, whether they've had quarrels, arguments, and all that. And now this person threatened to kill, that he was going to kill Mr. A. Mr. B threatened to kill Mr. A. Now, Mr. A is dead, has been found dead, in cold blood. Now, Mr. B will always be the suspect in that case. But at the time this murder was committed, Mr. B wasn't around. In fact, he had traveled on vacation with his family. So it would always say at the time of interrogation that he was not around. So claiming alibi in that way. So the suspect provided an alibi that placed him at a friend's house at the time of the crime. Example 2. The CID investigated the alibi and found inconsistencies in the suspect's story. The CID investigated the alibi and found inconsistencies in the suspect's story. Now, alibis aren't to be taken, just as they sound. Anybody can claim alibi. Officer, I wasn't around when it happened. She wasn't around when it happened. But it's now the duty call of the CID personnel to now begin to investigate the claim of alibi by the suspect to know whether truly the person was not around or whether they were around and were just telling lies or trying to, cover their crime. So the CID investigated the alibi and found inconsistencies in the suspect's story. Remember what inconsistencies are. Inconsistencies are irregularities, statements that don't match. The first time you're saying you were there, the next time you're saying you were there but you were out, the next time you're saying that you were out but you were found, you understand that. So inconsistencies, the statements aren't uniform, aren't the same. That is a case of inconsistency. And finally, last but not the least on the list, motive. Motive, M-O-T-I-V-E, M-O-T-I-V-E, motive. Now, my motive for teaching this class, for having this topic, is to explain their terminologies, the words that are related to this department of the, because I don't understand that not everybody understand what these words, what they mean, or how to use them. So that's my motive. The reason for which I'm having this class is what motive is. So motive is the reason or reasons. The reason or reasons behind a person's actions or behavior. The reasons behind your actions, behind your words, behind your behaviors. If you act in a manner, if you act in some type of ways, and then somebody feels, hey, why is he acting this way? Now, that question will be answered by the motive of the actor. Right, so motive, what is your motive for being a C.I.D? Maybe to arrest the person who had murdered your grandfather or what murdered somebody you love so much. That could be your reason for being a C.I.D personnel. So your motive is the reason or the reasons behind your actions or behind your behavior as an individual. But in this case, it is about a crime that is being committed. The reason or reason behind the person's actions or behaviors, particularly in committing a crime. So, using Charlie Kirk's example as a case study again. Now, Tyler Robinson, the guy who was a suspect and now found to be the one who committed the crime, of assassinating Charlie Kirk. Now, it was found that his motive for assassinating his fellow American, assassinating the young man, his motive was just pure hatred, just pure, was from the place of hatred, because they shared different political ideologies, So it was just from a place of hatred, not because Charlie Kirk had a personal dealing with Tyler Robinson. Or it was just the motive was just to get rid of it because they shared different political ideologies, or because he just didn't like him. He just didn't like his opinions or his perceptions about politics in the United States. So motive is about the reason or the reason behind the person's actions or behavior, particularly in committing a crime. Every criminal has a motive. Now it's the function, the role, the responsibility, the duty, the obligation of the CID personnel, the detective rather, to find out through the process of interrogation, the motive behind the action of the crime. Okay, so example sentences. 1, the detectives were trying to determine the motive behind the murder, as it seems to be premeditated. Now, what is premeditated in this case simply means planned. When you plan something, it's premeditated. For example, this class that I'm having right now, it's not spontaneous, it's premeditated. I thought about it. That is, I put it in thinking. I have thought about it, come on, I want to do this. So if somebody asks me now, what is my motive for having this class? I should be able to give a reason, I should be able to give a reason because I've thought about it. I've reasoned this out. So that is why it's possible for me to give a reason for having this class. So the detectives were trying to determine the motive behind the murder, as it seems to be premeditated. Meditation means to think. Premeditated means pre-planned. Meditate means to plan, to think about something, to plan something. Now, pre-plan, means to think about something before doing it. So, they are trying to investigate to determine the motive behind the murder as it seems to be premeditated. Now, in the case of Tyler Robinson, the action, the crime of assassinating Charlie Kirk is premeditated in that the criminal, the guy, the suspect, Tyler Robinson, thought about it. He had thought about their action before carrying it all out. So that is what premeditation means, premeditated, because the crime was premeditated. And finally, the suspect's motive appeared to be financial gain. The suspect's motive seemed to be financial gain from the insurance policy on the victim. The suspect's motive appeared to be financial gain from the insurance policy on the victim. So, in this case, the motive, the reason, of this suspect, of this person shooting this victim was the reason of financial gain. So this suspect wanted some financial gain, from this victim's insurance policy. But maybe it's the case that this person that was killed, had an insurance on their properties or on the properties or on their lives. And then the suspect feels that if he kills this victim, he was going to rake in, was going to have all the money due to this victim. So the suspect's motive appeared to be financial gain from the insurance policy on the victim. Now, not every motive originates from financial gain. It's not every motive. Some motives will just be personal vendetta. I don't like this person, I just want to deal with them. Or I want the money, so I deal with them. So motive is just the reason behind every criminal action. So that will be all for this class. If you have any question or maybe I've said something that is not particularly correct on this topic, you can please leave your comment in the comment section. Thanks a lot for being a part of this session. Watch out for the next episode. Bye for now.